These are African rhythms, passed down to us through ancient spirits. Feel the spirit, a unifying force. Come on, move with the spirit. Stand up, clap your hands. Groove with the rhythms, get down, get off.
Welcome to Africa World Now Project. I'm your host and producer, James Pope. Today, on Sudan, Africa World Now Project is next. Today we will hear from Sudanese diasporan activists who are maintaining vital attention on the conflict which has been taking place in Sudan since April 15th of this year. The human cost of this current iteration of the conflict is immeasurable from those observing from afar, but very measurable to those impacted directly, whether in Sudan or in the diaspora. It is vital we direct our empathy into action, our compassion into measured and intentional activities that are led by those impacted in country as well as in the Sudanese diaspora. The interconnectedness of this struggle impacts the entire African world, not just its segments. The hypermilitarization that drives this conflict, its intellectual and material components, are directly related to AFRICOM and militarized police in Black, brown, and poor communities around the world. This current iteration of conflict is between the Sudanese Armed Forces, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, led by Lieutenant General Mohamed Hamdan Daglo. As this conflict rages on, it continues to take a devastating toll on people across the country. The UN World Food Program has recently estimated that an additional 2.5 million are expected to slip into hunger in the coming months. WFP has provided food aid to nearly 1 million people in 14 of the country's 18 states since resuming operations on May 3rd. The UN agency plans to extend support to 5.9 million people by the end of the year. Today, we will hear a recent conversation between Africa World Now Project's Moizu Mutali and Dr. Dima Mahmoud. Dima Mahmoud is a humanist, Pan-Africanist, and actionist. Her extensive interdisciplinary expertise in research, cross-cultural communication, political analysis, and project management are reflected in the diverse public programs and conferences she organizes, as well as the initiatives and collaborations she spearheads through her strategic research consultancy established in 2014. Her work contributes to advancing sustainable socioeconomic and political development in Africa and the Middle East, and she has consulted for a number of international organizations and is co-founder of the Nubia Initiative, a transboundary organization aimed at leveraging art, academia, and technology to protect, preserve, and promote Nubia's endangered heritage and languages. Her latest project is the Joint European Mentoring Initiative, of which she is a co-founding director, leveraging her extensive program and content management expertise to develop a more comprehensive support platform for mobile researchers. In 2019, she moved from Washington, D.C. to her father's village, Kabaga, the northern state in Sudan, where she is working with her family, national, regional, and international networks on designing and executing entirely community-led, human-centered initiatives aimed at socioeconomic self-sustainability. Dr. Mahmoud completed her MA and PhD on Middle East Policy Studies and Sudanese Foreign Policy and International Legitimacy. She obtained her BA in Political Science from Townsend University. Also in our program today, we will hear voices from the demonstration, which was graciously provided to us by Sudanese American journalist Ismail Kushkush. After Dima, we will hear in the following order from recent Harvard graduate Reem Ali, in both a poem she delivered at the 2023 program honoring Black graduates from Harvard and then her reflections at the June 3rd demonstration. Along with Reem, we will also hear Emmy Mahmoud. Emmy Mahmoud is a Sudanese American slam poet. Emmy Mahmoud has supported the work of UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, since 2016 and was appointed as the UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador in June 2018 after giving the first ever TED-held event in a refugee camp. Born in Khartoum, Sudan, before later moving to the United States, Emmy has used her talents to raise awareness around refugee causes. Emmy and the UNHCR have collaborated on works including How Am I to Celebrate, which explores the millions of refugees marking Ramadan away from their homes and loved ones. Boy in the Sand, dedicated to Alan Kurdi on the first anniversary of his death. Head Over Hills, written in August 2017 to mark the announcement of the millionth South Sudanese refugee entering Uganda, and A Procession of Misfits, which speaks to the themes of home and belonging. Our show is produced today in solidarity with the Native, Indigenous, African, and Afro-descendant communities at Standing Rock, Venezuela, Corporation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi, Brazil, the Avalon Village in Detroit, Colombia, Kenya, Palestine, South Africa, Ghana, Haiti, and other places who are fighting for the protection of our land for the benefit of all peoples. Listen intently, think critically, act accordingly.
Dima, welcome back to the show. And this time we're on site. And if you could just tell the listening audience where we are and what you're doing as well. Yeah, we can start from there.
Thank you so much, Muiza, and thank you for being here. And thank you to all our listeners. We are in Sudan, USA. We're sitting right in front of the Embassy of Sudan. I am here. I resumed my sit-in on the 3rd of June, marking 4 years since the violent dispersal of our peaceful sit-in in front of the army headquarters that claimed the lives of so many of our sheroes and heroes, our revolutionaries. I returned here to honor them, to honor their legacy, to honor our revolution. I returned here because we're not on the news, and whatever is on the news is lies. I apologize for the sounds in the background, but this is live, just like our revolution, just like the reality on the ground. I am here because I participated at the second session of the United Nations Permanent Forum of People of African Descent, and there was no mention of Sudan, of the systemic racism that is the international engagement with Sudan vis-a-vis Ukraine. But what's really painful is that I happened to meet the representative of Sudan to the United Nations, and his response was, "It is much better now." And so if this is the representative, if that is the message that is being communicated to the United Nations, that this is much better, then we really have a lot more work to do. And this is why I'm here. I'm here because even those who claim to represent us are lying. And I repeat, they do not represent us. The military does not represent us. The Janjaweed, the RSF, they are war criminals and genocidal.
And as you mentioned, this is 4 years, almost to the day, when the military went in and disrupted, killed the people fighting for change in Sudan in 2019, June 2019. And this is now June 2023. And of course, now we have those generals fighting amongst each other, not for the people of Sudan, but for the spoils of the country. If you could also elaborate a bit more of the situation in the country as you see it right today. We've had the last time we came, it was just at the beginning of the war between these generals, and that's over a month ago, almost 6 weeks to the day. But what has you been getting? What's the information you've been getting on the ground from your family members, from people, of what is happening and how they're dealing with this situation?
It's bad. It's really, really, there are no words. What, out of 86 hospitals, we have maybe 8 functional ones? And I can't keep track, to be honest. So the information I have may not be relevant anymore. I take a moment to uplift our sister, our Shiro, Sarah Al-Hassan, at BS on Blast. She gives daily updates, as painful as it is. So you will have the updates there. I can tell you now, the fighting has not stopped. Darfur is burning. People are starving. We're running out of resources. I've personally lost 3 aunts just because they have no access to medical care. I don't know what to say. Water scarcity, money, wiring money, sending money to people there, trying to secure their exit, trying to secure their visas, trying to advocate to countries to open up their borders or to take us in or to anything. Something, Muiza, anything. It's not happening. And it's not because these governments can't. It is a lack of will. It is a political action. It is a political choice. It is a lack of political will. And this is why I call on all children of Africa to recognize our struggle is one. We continue to be subhuman to these people. We continue to be subhuman to this system. And we need to call out these contradictions. We need to call out the US when it says we don't negotiate with terrorists. And we need to ask, who are you negotiating with in Sudan if it's not the terrorists? And why are you only having these negotiations with the Arabs and not the Africans?
And we say the Arabs, if you could specify the countries. I see the poster that you have in front of me as we're speaking here in front of the Sudanese embassy. If you could specify the countries and their interests, and particularly, I was talking to somebody else, one of the journalists recently, who was talking about how the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, have been coming to the United States recently in the past, trying to get lobbyists and things like that. So if you can expand on that, because I think to put a proper context, because so that way people can get a real the reason behind why you're here on Embassy Row in front of the Sudanese embassy, which has all these international in Washington D.C. connecting the dots.
Yes, absolutely. I'll start by saying this is not actually my sign, and I find it incomplete. The sign has the rulers of the UAE, what I refer to as the United Axis of Evil. Their interests are plenty. Their interest is the gold, is our fertile land and the food, our young men who they pay, the Janjaweed, and I refuse to call them RSF because it's gaslighting. They are the Janjaweed. They are the same people responsible for the Darfur genocide that this world supposedly rallied against when George Clooney was happy to have his act out here. You have them. You have the Saudis for very similar reasons, to sponsor their illegal, illegitimate war in Yemen. You have the Egyptians whose military government whether they like to admit it or not. Sisi may have taken the civilian cloak. This is a military government, and they cannot have a civilian Sudan. They cannot afford having a civilian Sudan. And this is why they have been meddling in our revolution since day one. And this is just to name a few. In Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, and their continued meddling. I do want to comment about the Janjaweed and their PR attempts. It's not the first time. They've done it in 2019, and that's how they were able to navigate the lifting of the sanctions. Hassan Minhaj, I think, also had an episode about it alongside Marine and Neil, I think. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, dear listeners, check it out so you understand what we mean by the rebrand and how it's just gaslighting. But beyond the Arabs, we have the European Union, and we must hold them accountable. The European Union directly funded the Janjaweed so that they can send their mercenaries to Libya, so that they can round up Africans, particularly young Africans, trying to escape for a better life, for hope, to escape prosecution, for whatever reason that they are trying to escape, which is international right, if we are going to say, if we truly were human, this is an international right, a human right to seek safety, to seek refuge. No. The European Union is paying the Janjaweed to send their mercenaries so they can round our African sisters and brothers and either sell them back to their governments to prosecute them, or they'll sell them in a slave market in Libya. They can deny it all they want. The information is all there. Our Eritrean sisters and brothers, our Ethiopian sisters and brothers, our African sisters and brothers from around the continent. That's the European Union, so they can't turn around and say, we care for human rights or we care for the democratic transition. This is hypocrisy and we need to call it out. How they had this international outcry for Ukraine and a complete blind eye for Sudan, even though they funded what led to this point. They need to be called out. They need to be called out, and they need to be called out now. Some of them said, oh, we're going to stop funding after the coup in 2021. Money is still flowing into the pockets of Hemetti. And we need to ask questions and we need to connect these dots. And then, of course, you have the US, who will not have Russia continue taking the gold. But while we're speaking of gold, we need to also talk about France specifically from the EU, because it too has interest in gold because of Francophone Africa. And I think we discussed this a little bit in our earlier conversation. If Francophone Africa goes for a unified African currency backed by gold, France's economy crumbles, crashes. It's not something that can happen. It's not something they can afford to allow to happen. All of these are literally, they're battling over Sudan, over the world food basket, over our resources, and not one person, not one government is actually looking at our people and what our people are doing. I'll go further and say not even our people can see what we are doing. We're taking it on a minute-to-minute basis. Yeah.
And of course, that's Dr. Dima Mahmood, who is a Pan-Africanist and actionist. Here in front of the Sudanese embassy, she's protesting the war between the generals, which is affecting the entire country. Yeah, you were about to say something else.
Yes. I'm also here because this war is an attempt to thwart our revolution. Yet another attempt. That we would be so entrenched in saving our family, so unable to focus on anything else that we forget this revolution, that we forget our martyrs, that we forget the promise. I am here to say we will not forget. We will never forget, and our revolution continues. It is a revolution of consciousness. Thank you.
And on that note, I think we should probably expand a bit more on that, because just like the there's pivotal moments in the revolution when the revolution was being attempted to be hijacked. You have June 2019, and then you have October 2021, and then of course you have April 2023. And it's interesting in Sudan's history, April seems to play a very important role. There's military coups, a lot of coups. Nimeri, for those listeners who don't know, Aries. But I was saying April seems to carry a number of a lot of moments in Sudan's political history. For those who might know, Jaffa Nimeri, who was a military ruler, was overthrown in April 1985 as well, and then there are some other dates. But if you could expand on how, because I think to properly explain to the audience so that we don't forget that people should really understand that these two forces, these two people who are involved, it's not necessarily, they're not backed by Sudanese. It's not like two groups. Yeah, and if you could expand on that so that people have a very clear, because sometimes people would think, oh, it's one side of the country fighting another side of the country. But that's not what the case is.
Yes, and I'll point your attention to that particular block there. It says it is not a civil war, and encouraging people to ask more questions. The attempts to hijack this revolution have never stopped. I choose to look at this as the third time, and as we know, the third time's a charm. They do not represent us. We have said it time and time and time and time again. Since we first started marching, no more military rule. How much clearer can we get? I mean, English isn't our first language. It's the systems. Let's go. No more military rule means something. So if it's not being communicated, we really must ask, are they not hearing us, or are they choosing not to hear us? Are we voiceless, or are we being silenced? The Janjaweed. Who brought the Janjaweed in? Who brought them in? Were they not advocated to be integrated as part of the military? Then that still falls under no more military rule. Neither of them represent us. They are both illegitimate as far as I am personally concerned. And if you hear the people, if you follow what the people have been saying, get on Twitter, get on Facebook, speak with Sudanese people. The military does not represent us. The Janjaweed do not represent us. We have been self-governing since 2019. That self-governance may not look like what the international system would like it to look like, but we are here. We're still here. And still we rise. We have been our own government. We have been our own doctors. We have been our own lawyers. We have been our own journalists. We have been our own keepers. Where is this world?
And I wanted you to expand on that self-governance, because that's part also of the neighborhood committees, which were the ones who have been the backbone of the revolution since 2018. I mean, and then of course and expand on that, how they have constantly been marginalized by the international forces.
I mean, divide and rule is not new. Divide and conquer is not new. So even though there was some kind of umbrella representation of civilians, many of the local resistance committees were not. But I can say of what we've seen since the signing of the facade of an agreement of, power transition. They call it civilian-led. It was not civilian-led. Even if Hamdok was civilian, it was not civilian-led. The military was still in power. The military dictated. they have secured the committee. They have the committees, the local resistance committees, secured the villages, secured the cities, the spaces, let's say, the communities. It is community-led, community-centered. It's intergenerational because you have the youth doing what the youth need to do, and then we have an elders council that also elders councils for each of these regions that also work. It's really there are no words. There are no words. As I said, I personally can't keep track of exactly how they have been organizing, how they have shut down the country, sometimes shut down access to their areas to protect, how they have closed ranks in ways to secure what is being done. And you won't see any of this on the news. You'll only see Sudanese people speaking about this, and maybe a few articles here or there, mostly written either by Sudanese or by Africans. So the work they're doing is amazing. They have various local resistance committees on Twitter. They have Twitter accounts you're able to follow. There's some hashtags that you can follow. Hashtag Keep Eyes on Sudan. Hashtag Eyes on Darfur. Hashtag RSF loots homes. Hashtag Sudan updates. And there's a website, eyesonsudan.net, where you can see all these details and also see ways to support. Some of them are vetted fundraisings, but if you can't give, share. And there are other ways that you can engage your government, find out what they're doing in your name for the people of Sudan.
And as you said, these are block by block. It's within the city of Khartoum and other places. It's like
definitely
really
outside Khartoum as well. Yes, outside Khartoum as well.
And I wanted to also kind of follow up on when we were talking about countries in neighboring countries, particularly Egypt, because this year marks in next month, July, 10 years since Sisi had a coup d'etat against an elected government, and the U.S. said nothing. Of course, they supported the coup, and they didn't call it a coup. But it's this situation in Sudan today. For us, we'll follow African issues and all that. Looks like history repeating itself. I don't know if you could. Am I being too broad when I say that?
No, absolutely. History is repeating itself. And guess what? History will continue to repeat itself until we learn the lesson. We're not learning that we cannot and must not compartmentalize justice. We can't. We are asking for more problems, for more chaos when we compartmentalize justice. And this is what's been happening. This is why I grew up in Egypt. My Egyptian friends, the people I went to school with, people I lived around, people I broke bread with, won't so much as ask what is happening in Sudan on their platform. That is a level of trauma, a level of fear that I find myself, I suppose, unable to hold it against them. I can only send blessings and hope for the awakening. I hope they see what's being kept from them and why. Because our chants were the same chants that were across the streets of Egypt. No more military rule. يسقط حكم العسكر.
And if you could expand a bit when you were talking about you can understand the trauma for people who might not know the situation as that deeply and as nuanced. If you can expand what you mean by that when you say you can understand when they fear to do that. So people understand the complexity.
Absolutely. Egypt's Tahrir Square was during the protest, the Egyptian revolution, if it can be called that, in my opinion. It was hijacked, it was thwarted. But for when it was, Tahrir Square was iconic, celebrated. The world stopped and looked at Tahrir Square. Almost every newspaper had like that sky view of Tahrir Square. When you go to Egypt today, Tahrir Square is barricaded. That place where you sought freedom has a statue of a soldier. In November 2022, there were calls for mass protests in Egypt. 11/11. And of course, on the social media, there was the counter calls, or even if you go out, nothing will happen. That day, across the streets of Cairo, police cars, tanks, ambulances. I don't know what the vehicle that carries the prisoners, I don't know what it's called, but that. Motorcycles that are it's a motorcade around the streets of Egypt to remind people, to tell people, if you think of stepping out of your home, we're ready. That kind of trauma. I mean, this kind of trauma. The kind of trauma that has an Egyptian looking at me and not seeing their lost revolution. The kind of trauma that has every Arab who, when you say we're from Sudan, they'll say, wow, yes, great people, kind people. Where are they? Are they asking their governments? Are they yielding their platforms? Are they asking their communities, their people? That's the trauma I mean. The trauma that you don't realize how you're being weaponized. You yourself are being weaponized to crush the morals of your family just across the border. The conversations, the jokes that were made. I recognize that we have a lot of, particularly the Nubian community in Egypt, that has opened their doors wide open. There was an elder who was recorded on video who had prepared his son's home for a wedding and yielded it to the Sudanese families. So I can't say the Egyptian people, all the Egyptian people, but you will find some horrid comments, Muiza. Some memes of, a woman with kids, blackface kids, saying, oh, this is what Egypt 2033, this is what Egypt will look like. That kind of not seeing how you're being used to replicate harm. That's trauma that, again, I can only pray for them to see, to heal, to wake up. And I hold space for that. I'm here in any way I can, but this is their fight.
And also, I think the other thing is also the intelligence community as well within Egypt, and which completely stifled that revolution. And I don't know if that was something you're also alluding to, why people are scared.
All of it, absolutely. I mean, during that time, the 11/11, the call for the march, the protest on November 11th, parallel to it was COP27. Was it 27? Yeah, in Sharm el-Sheikh, COP27. I lose count of their number because they're irrelevant. They're all the same COPs because nothing is yielding. Ala's sisters, there's a journalist, he's Egyptian British, who's been arrested, and he was on a hunger strike. And there was a lot of pressure to release him, to free him. And there was a lot of pressure on the restrictions to freedom of speech, on the violations of these rights, which that plus the intelligence committees, plus that everything is tapped, plus that you can't trust who you're talking to because you never know who's been, bought or bribed or threatened or planted. You never know. And it's not just for Egypt. It's within, if we're being honest, every community, particularly every African community, more specifically every revolutionary African community. Everything in this system is invested in seeing us stay where we are. They don't recognize that we are time and we are rising.
And I wonder, before we go, if you could tell us what some of the things you would like to have people here be in solidarity with the people in Sudan, especially particularly at this time, and also, and then beyond that as well. Beyond the stopping of the war was critical, but then beyond that.
Beyond that, we have a lot of healing to do, to find each other even. We're in so many different places. Wherever we found ways to seek refuge. How people listening to this, particularly in the US, can help. There are efforts to call on this government to work on visa policies that facilitate the reunification of families, Sudanese families who are here, who are willing to open and wanting their families to come here, to facilitate that. You can call on your representatives to facilitate that. You can hold them accountable to their silence and to them refusing to work with the African Union or to work with people who are saying this is an African problem and needs to have an African solution, but no, the US will only be working with the Gulf, where their interests are. You can call on your representatives to question that, to call it into account. You can amplify the calls of Sudanese. You can humanize Sudan. If you know any Sudanese person, one Sudanese person, share their story. Share how you know them, how you met them, anything. They are your Sudan. When we say keep eyes on Sudan, if you met a Sudani, they are your Sudan for now. Amplify them, check on them. See that they're okay. We keep saying we're okay. We're not okay. We're not okay. Again, we are seeing the world not see us. We are hearing the world not hear us. When they say, oh, one more negotiation. Oh, but we have to work with... No, we don't have to work with the military. This system, when it wants something done, they do it. When they wanted to get rid of Saddam, they got rid of Saddam. When they wanted to get rid of Gaddafi, they got rid of Gaddafi. And so if they want to get rid of the Janjaweed, they can get rid of the Janjaweed. It is a matter of choice, and they're not taking it. You can call that out. You can call these contradictions out. We must eradicate fear. People are afraid to call it out. People are afraid to see just how much this relates to them, especially if they are of African ancestry, wherever they are in the world, because this is about black power. This is about black lives. And whether or not they matter. So unless when you were chanting down the street saying Black Lives Matter, you meant only African Americans, then you have a responsibility to ask about the black lives in Sudan. The black lives in Senegal. I take a moment to yield our platform to Senegal, where the protests are erupting. You see this madness in oppression. Now I'm yielding to Senegal, but I also want to yield to Ethiopia and what's happening there, to Congo, DRC and what's happening there, to Niger Delta, to Cameroon, it's everywhere. Our struggle is one. And our solution is also one. And it's eradicating these contradictions. Wherever you meet them. However that eradication looks like, whether it's within you, personally, or something you are hearing from around you. Call it out. You have that power.
Dima, thank you again for being on the show, and also thank you for all the work you're doing. And we will be keeping in touch with you to find out what else needs to be done, what else, and also to make sure that our listeners have the proper perspective on the situation in Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you. Keep eyes on Sudan.
I have thought 1,000,000 times over of how to begin this, of what to start with, of the possibilities and realities witnessed in 4 years. Yet my words elude me, escaping, disappearing off the tip of my tongue. So why do my words elude me today? Why do they escape now of all times? Why can I not articulate what I could 4 years ago when I chanted about the dreams of democracy, when I fought for the right for Sudan to exist in academic spaces? Why? It is because I simply cannot any longer. I cannot pretend, I cannot ignore, I cannot speak of joy at this very second when all I see and hear and smell is suffering, when my country and my people burn to the ground. When every dream is the gunshots and the soldiers, when every phone call is the bombs and the static. When the soil that raised me, proud in its black lineage, is now stained red, tainted metallic with blood. When I cry and plead and beg for us to be seen, when the humanitarian response for 46 million people has been exclusively led by our QR codes and Venmos and the volunteers on the ground for weeks. I'm not sure how to wax poetic when my family suffers, when our cities are now rubble, when the world watches silent as we burn to the ground. As our corpses rot in the streets, undeserving of the dignity and shroud of graves. I don't know what to say because I'm tired. I am so very tired of having to prove myself, my existence and my humanity, of having to put on display my every traumatic memory for the world to care. I'm tired of being too Muslim for black people to care, and of being too black for Muslims and Muslims and Arabs to care. Must I craft stories and romanticize our reality, share to you that we are the birthplace of humanity, that our very name, Sudan, translates to the land of the blacks, that our warriors centuries ago led the strongest of dynasties, that our Nile runs endless, our soils fertile, the Red Sea unparalleled in its beauty? Must I tell you the stories of the pyramids and the legends of the temples? Should I show you the deserts of gold and the heavenly forests and farms? Sensationalize the lions and the camels and the sand dunes? Is it not enough that we are human, that we bleed the same blood? Why are we not enough? Why have we never been enough? I stand before you today, leaving Harvard after 4 years. 4 years of revolution, 4 years of death, of loss, of disappointment, but also 4 years of resilience, 4 years of strength, 4 years of beauty, carrying the legacies of my ancestors and the hopes of future generations, of young black Muslim women, of the Sudanese people, with the message that we will not surrender, that we will not succumb, that we will not forfeit, that we will continue the fight, that we will live on, that we will survive, and that we will thrive. Inshallah, God willing.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. When I was originally asked whether I'd like to speak at this protest, I said no. I wasn't sure how to address a crowd of people from the diaspora, some who immigrated here decades ago, and others who caught their glimpses of Sudan like I did, through the summer vacations, the faint motors of rickshaws, and the laughter of grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins over Shai al-Sabah. But the truth is, that's not our reality anymore. As much as we want to romanticize our Sudan, the one that we grew up loving through the rose-colored glasses, we cannot. And because of this, the simple truth is that we no longer have the privilege or luxury to say no. The Sudani people are incredibly resilient. They have endured decades of oppression and have one of the richest traditions of civil resistance in the world, most recently put on display with the 2019 revolution. These people, our grandparents, aunts and uncles and cousins, have carried Sudan on their backs since independence 67 years ago. They cannot do that any longer though. Our reality today is war, a war we are not complicit in, a war we have no stake in, and a war that is already lost. Our reality is the bombs, the shot up and settled in homes, the corpses in the streets, the gender-based violence, the refugees and the IDPs, and the silence of the globe. And it is because of this reality that we do not have the luxury of remaining silent. Our people on the ground are still struggling day in and day out for their survival, still doing what they can to protect the glimpses of our Sudan, even while fleeing with just the clothes on their back. And so, as the diaspora, we owe it to them to fight for the Sudan they've kept for 67 years. We owe it to our families and friends, to our ancestors, and to the proud lineage that we descend from. We currently have power, access, and a voice. Here's how I'm asking you to use them. 1, help bring attention and awareness to what's happening in Sudan. I know firsthand how painful it is to have to constantly display your traumas to draw attention to the crises at hand. But the current plight of Sudan is bigger than that. The world does not seem to understand just how severe our reality is. And it is up to us, those with access to our families and the horror stories on the ground, to convey this urgency and to convince people, and specifically the international community, to act. 2, fundraise, fundraise, fundraise. It is disappointing, yet expected, that it's the grassroots donations efforts that have made up nearly the entirety of Sudan's humanitarian response for the past 6 weeks. It's the bake sales and the charity games and the mutual aid drives that are keeping Khartoum's handful of hospitals, last I heard, just 2, afloat, that are providing the sustenance for families that have lost everything. Sustain that energy. If you're looking for ways to get involved, draft a flyer to pass around your local masjid, your local community center, or school, detailing the urgency of the situation and places that can be donated to. 3, hold your politicians accountable. The favorite talking point of the United States is how many millions of dollars are pledged to Sudan right now. Ask how much was given to Ukraine, who has a comparable population to Sudan 6 weeks into their crisis. The answer is nearly 4 times what the United States currently has pledged to Sudan and its neighboring countries. A mere $245 million, nothing in comparison to the $3 billion the UN estimates Sudan needs right now. The United States government was complicit in the legitimization of these generals, as was the global community, ignoring the will of the Sudani people who stood steadfast in their opposition to military rule after the 2021 coup. They hold the responsibility of humanitarian assistance today from their choice of greed over the democratic will. We must hold them accountable. So email, call, and set up meetings with your representatives and senators. Bring to them the demands of the Sudanese people. Emphasize our humanitarian and diplomatic needs and the fact that there is no military solution to this conflict, that it must be civilians at the table led by the women and resistance committees that have always served as the unsung heroes of Sudan. We will hold them accountable. Before ending, I want to acknowledge that today is June 3rd, and the 4th anniversary of the massacre that took place in front of the military headquarters in 2019. A massacre which we have still not seen justice for. May Allah have mercy on the lives of the people that were lost that day, and all of those lost in the course of the past 4 years, and may He accept them all as shuhada. A verse from the Quran I think powerfully reflects the sentiment we are all feeling regarding this massacre and the current events is the following from Surah Ibrahim, Ayah 42. قوله تعالى ولا تحسبن الله غافلا عما يعمل الظالمون.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. It's such an honor to be here and I'm so proud of you. We're going to stop the war, inshallah. I'm going to start with a new piece that I wrote just for this and because of what happened in these past several weeks. And then I'll talk a little bit more, inshallah. Another war came crashing down on our bodies. The cut of a broken piece and the bite of a broken promise are the same, except with the first one, you die and everyone around you. Back home, our skin is green because we're full of life, but a full life looks so different when we are poured out onto the rubble, rotting in the streets. Every university became a grave, every garden a final resting place. Our brothers and sisters falling faster than we can dig the holes. Bloodlines burned, singed to nothing, soil to sand, ashes to dust. On the receiving end of a bullet is a mother, a girl, a brother, a family, a home. Airstrikes the Khoi Dana, airstrikes the Khoi Dana. Blood in the streets of Khartoum and Al Ubaid. Blood in the wadis of Niyala and Janana. In the mountains of Al Fashir, the pyramids of Marwi. Blood across the sky of our beautiful country, Sudan. Baladi, my love, who did this to you? Who stripped you bare and turned all your children loose? The bodies fall and they don't stop. The killing starts but we don't run, hoping against hope that it's a mistake, that if we sit quiet and still enough that maybe it'll stop, that if our hearts beat loudly enough they'll know that we're human, that we bleed the same blood, that we bleed the same blood. Who decides who lives or dies? My uncle Abdul Aziz walked home from prayer. The bomb soared down from above, took him and 4 neighbors away from us. Sunrise saw my cousin Ammar on the way to college. My uncle Ibrahim resting at home. Each found a bullet, each found an end, without notice, without question, without ceremony. One on the first day, one on the second, another soon after. Our families broke fast together one night and planned burials together by morning. The next day comes and there's nowhere to run. My country falls to pieces and my people go missing one by one. Roads covered, rubble still bleeding, sent to the bottom of a crater, reduced to a footnote in a world that is said to be in crisis. First orphans, now refugees. For the first time, the second or the third, home is burning. See the buildings falling, see the fire flashing, hear the people evaporating before our eyes. The hospital filled with the wounded and our lungs filled with ash. Then the hospitals closed and the borders too. And the headlines named our killers but not us. And the world keeps moving. And the people whisper it's a mystery. And their names turn to memories in our mouths. Their names turn to memories in our mouths. A country without its people. A people robbed of time. How can I explain what it's like to sleep and not wake up? Or to wake up and know it happened again? And you are oceans away, weeping, praying, screaming for our voices to be heard. Dying for our lives, literally dying for our lives. Who pulled the trigger? Who bought the bullets? Who sold the guns? Who will stop the war? Tell me how to make it stop. Tell me how to make it stop. Sudan, Baladi. Who did this to you, my love? My country, can you hear me? My country, can you hear me? Thank you. لا للحرب نعم للسلام نعم للسلام حب نعم للسلام لا للحرب نعم للسلام. I'm very, very incredibly passionate about this, not only because we've lived through this so many times, but because all of us know that the biggest lie we've ever been told is that we're not one family, that we are not one people, one family. The biggest lie they ever told us was that they speak for the people when the people are here. The biggest lie they ever told us is that the people are voiceless when we speak loud and proud. The hardest thing is watching more people die when we know it could have been prevented. Preventable deaths, unacceptable in 2023. And the hardest thing about this happening right now on the tail end of so many crises is knowing how little help our people are getting besides from ourselves. Knowing that we've been doing it alone for a while. If any of you have listened to anyone who spoke today and heard what the speaker said, you know that Sudan has been suffering for a very long time.
That's it for Africa Woke Now Project for this week. I would like to thank you for joining us today and look forward to spending time with you next week. Follow us on Twitter at AFWRLDNWPRJ, Instagram at Africa Woke Now Project. Access to our other media platforms can be reached through the bios of our social media. I'm your host and producer, James Pope. The Africa Woke Now Project Collective consists of international media journalist, executive producer, and human rights activist Mowiza Muntali, Africa Woke Now Project media correspondent Funa Ngonda, senior research, content contributor, and production director Dr. Tasneem Siddiqui, senior research, content contributor, and production associate Dr. Josh Myers, associate producer and content contributor Dr. Keisha Khan Perry, content contributor and filmmaker Kurt Orderson, technology advisor is Byron Gray of Grayworks Technologies, and creative directors, international creative and artist designer Tabassum Siddiqui and Judah Pope. Africa Woke Now Project can be heard every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on WSNC, NPR affiliate and broadcast service of Winston-Salem State University. Programs are archived and available on all podcast platforms. Search Africa Woke Now Project. Until next week, be safe, be peaceful, and above all, be intelligent.
Even still, sack a bag of troubles, make a single double, loop the coin and join the minimum wage. I had a plan if I was the man, I project, lay it low and leg mad cassettes. I uncondition my ways of the everyday sunset, waging my days to the one bet, cause your breaks I have the capital cakes, weather mine, out of line, I busy till the early morning. Freak the wake call, I get a tap on my shoulder, cause the days of the breaks be just about over. The arts of the six won't play with my bag of chips, I got the sevens in my pocket somewhere. Reasons for the cheer or temperature here. I keep it to the rear and then I'm exploding.
I be the fabulous, but see, unlike the G, I got the flea up in the name. Kino up in my cousin from the Peter Pipe. Unlike the others, latching on the win, I caught the fame. Pass the task to ask me about the native tongue again. My friend, I tell you, jungle brothers on the run. I've shaken hands with many devils in the industry. Believe the genesis, like Phil what stills me that I'm deaf. Like the autograph, I sign until the break.
To my day life, my pops got the ducks, best believe we sailed the wave to the long. I laid the anchor in the Ville, and how I relate, I stay inside of my gates. Break days, mess up my mind, ground 0 degrees, and the weather feels fine. You open my eyes, man, thought I had a man, but how could I scan? I wasn't around. I seen the states and played the dates in the far, gathered the news from the Zoas around. Grew old with Mikey Rhodes and played the codes. Sometimes I don't budge without my cuz fuzz. A simple how you do, a check from my friends and my crew makes it definitely special.
Now there's no shiny happy people in the crew. We play the rough. I got the huff and puff to blow the house low. You know the never ending factor while I'm on the telesquid. I know I enterprise it, brother, so report to the bridge. I bounce a ball with my left, a squid with my right.
Cause the squid is just a
yo, he deserved to lose a fight. I might meander across your dream, traveling up the stream. Plug wonder why you're lonely tonight. We see the girls scream as if we're shocked by the live shell. Let's round them up and get them back to the hotel, motel, holiday. In fact, I'm gonna let you know once again the De La Soul is sure to show you we will hit the charter harder than the normal rapping bull.
1 2 0 1 2